everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. You might have noticed I did not say a writer and performer on strike because the strike is over. Yes, that's right. After 148 days, I think that's right, the strike is over. And immediately we were plunged back into work, which we didn't expect. So we traded one anxiety for a new one. But enough of that. Today's episode, this is Fat Tony. This is great. If you don't know who Fat Tony is, I'm going to read you his bio right now. Originally from Houston, Texas, Anthony Obi started his musical career performing with a number of different rap groups in high school, but it wasn't until his early 20s that he began writing and releasing albums under the name Fat Tony. Since 2010, he's released over a dozen albums and EPs on labels like Young One and Don Giovanni, and his latest, I Will Make a Baby in This Damn Economy, was just released on Car Park Records at the end of August, and it's great. I first heard Tony's, was it 10,000 Hours, I think, back, 5 years ago, something like that, and loved it so much. And then he was part of a DSA fundraiser that Sarah Squirm and her sketch group and I produced in the early lockdown in quotes, the quarantine phase of the pandemic. And Tony was always such a nice and generous dude, and I love his music so much, so I was like, I gotta have him on the show. And my impression of him, just based on those short interactions before, proved true. He is a nice dude, very open, very generous, fun to talk to. I hope you like this episode. I should note, this was interesting. Tony Zoomed with me. I do this over Zoom. He Zoomed with me as he was walking around his neighborhood. And at first I was like, "Are you sure you don't want to go inside?" But it actually turned out to be really cool. I was worried about the sound, but also the fact that he would have to walk around holding his phone up to his face the whole time. But it sounds good. And I think it added an interesting energy to the show. So I hope you like this. And if you do, and this is your first time listening to Beginnings, what I like to do here at the start of the show is a little recommended if you like. If you like this talk with Tony, maybe you like other episodes that I've done with people from the world of hip-hop. So, I've been doing this show almost 14 years. I've talked to Mike Eagle and as I mentioned in this show, Psalm 1, Cadence Weapon, No Can Do, Jean Grey, ton of other people, and people outside of music, writers and comedians and performers. So check out those episodes, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from, leave a review, follow me on social media at Andy Beckerman. Is Twitter dead? I think tomorrow he's supposedly, look, Elon Musk is a piece of shit and one of the dumbest people in the world. And half the time or more, let's say 80, 90% of the time, he'll say something online that does not come to fruition. But supposedly tomorrow, they're going to start verifying people with their government IDs. And I don't think most people are going to actually upload that. So I don't know, maybe it's dead. But I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram and I guess TikTok. So at Andy Beckerman. Coming up next week, Greg Rucka, wonderful comics writer, wonderful screenwriter. So stay tuned for that. But for now, let's talk to Tony. This is the second interview that I've done where someone, I talked to someone, they were on the way moving from Athens, Georgia to, I believe, Vermont. And so they were they pulled over in a Walmart parking lot or something like that. And we talked in the car there. You were walking around, I'll say Los Angeles. So so no one's doxing you.
Yeah, please. I've been doxed enough in my day. I'm good on doxing.
My wife and I do a podcast, and in the lockdown portion of the pandemic, we were so fucking bored. We
tried doxing somebody?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's what it was. Yeah, I wasn't going to say that we were we like recorded podcasts like on the go in the car and stuff like that. No. We went online. We found some right wing shitheads, and then
Whoa.
spent all our time doxing them.
So what happened?
Nothing. I mean, I can't yes and myself. That wasn't.
Hey man, no, man. Spill the beans, man.
We did, but okay. I mean, this is not really what I want to talk about, but like, here's a question: can we use? Is it moral for us to? I'm assuming we're on the same political side, somewhat.
We work in entertainment. You can assume that.
Well, I don't know. There's Bill Maher. There's some right wing folks.
True.
But you also did. I don't know if you remember this, but like Sarah Squirmond, some other people, and I set up a fundraiser back in 2020, and you were through DSA that you were part of.
Yes,
so,
that was fun.
Yeah. So I assume
I am
you're
down
on
with
our
the
side.
DSA people. Yes,
Great. Okay.
I am with the DSA heads. Trust me, I know them very well.
Is it moral for us to use their tactics against them? Like, is it more like, the libs of TikTok goes around doxing drag queens or whatever? Should we do the same thing? And again, this is not what I want to talk about, but since it came up, maybe we can use this as a way in.
I'm of the mindset that it's okay to use your enemy's tools when it's necessary for self-defense. Mm-hmm. I typically find that the enemy's tools, the oppressor's tools, are typically tools that they fancy that I would never use myself. But if I need to use it in self-defense, as in I'm being fucking attacked, or the people I loved are being attacked, or the leaders of our community are being attacked, then I think that it's fair game. But I wouldn't go out of my way to do it if I was not under attack. You know what I mean?
You would not like of your own volition be like, well, I'm going to start doxing people, or I'm going to start, throwing Molotov cocktails at, Mitch McConnell's house or whatever. Like whatever's the thing that's going to kick off, the next war here in the United States.
I think that it really depends on like the circumstances. Like if it's in retaliation to someone's talking points or someone's opinions, then I don't think that it's necessary. But if these people are actively causing harm or actively using their talking points to incite violence or to hurt others, then I think we have to use any means necessary in self-defense. It
is interesting. I never thought that we're like kind of around the same age. I never thought that I would have to start contemplating.
I mean, we are doing a podcast. We're probably around the same age.
I never thought I would have to start contemplating like what is going to happen if things start falling apart, which very well could happen. I'm not saying it will happen in our lifetimes, but it could very well happen in our lifetimes. And I'm like, that's a new thing. I thought I could just like...
It's all possible.
Yeah. Do whatever my dreams were. Pursue whatever my dreams were when I was a kid. And that would be my life in some way. Not like, do I have to learn how to use a gun? Do I have to learn... Which could or not. I mean... I would be all thumbs. I don't think I would be good with a gun. So put me in the, but wherever we're planning, what's the bunker where we're moving there's a map of the territory and I'm moving the little pieces around. Put me there.
Well, I think no one ever expects that things are going to come to that. And, when it comes to violence or war or defense, I often think about my father who fought in the Nigerian Civil War when he was a teenager. He was in high school. The war began. He was pulled out of school, had to fight, and fought in the war for about a year or two. And then the war ended and he went back and finished high school. So, I don't think anybody can ever see this shit coming in their lives, but I think it's up to us to at least be like aware that it's possible, because even if we don't see it in our country, we like see it globally. So we know that it's within the realm of possibility that we might need to defend ourselves. So I think if we move with knowing that anything is possible at any time and just kind of being prepared mentally to do what's necessary, then if and when it happens, will be less shocked and just a wee bit more prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. When he got, I mean, did he know he was about to get drafted? Was it like here with Vietnam where there was some kind of lottery or something like that? Or was it just like people are just like, all right, you and you, we're going to the front?
Honestly, I have no idea, because this is something that like I think definitely has caused them a lot of PTSD. So a lot of me learning about it is by reading history books about it, seeing news reports about it. I've only heard a little about his own experience. Like, he only went as far to be like, I was pulled out of school. I got shot. Some of my best friends died next to me. The war ended. I went back to school. Then I saved up some money and I immigrated to the US. And this was back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Right. Did he go to Houston first?
He went to New York first, and then I believe he went to Oklahoma and found it to be too fucking cold. So he went to Houston, which Houston also has a big population of Niger people. So I think it makes sense for a Nigerian that's new to the US to want to go to Houston, Texas.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've had guests before whose parents are from Nigeria that ended up in Houston. But my wife's dad is from Nigeria, but then he ended up in New York. He like stayed in New York.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad wasn't having it. I think that like the cold is just something that he can't contemplate. It's like, what is this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Like on Christmas Day in like Lagos, it's like 90 degrees.
Right.
So he was just like, I don't even know what to do with this weather. What, like, I've never even contemplated it being cold.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Was Texas as fascist as it is now when you were growing up there?
I think yes, because George Bush was our governor before he was president.
Oh,
and
fuck, that's
after
right.
him, there was Rick Perry, who also sucked. And after him, there's Greg Abbott, who is also awful. So I think that there's always been that through line in Texas politics. But I think that there's something interesting about Texas that brings together people on the left and the right. Texans generally don't like people being in their business. Like, that's why I think Texans love guns. I think that's why Texans were so quick to like fucking defend the whole Waco siege and all that. You know what I mean? Texans of any denomination or ideology are all like, let us do whatever we want to do, whether that's smoking weed or having guns. Like, keep big government out of our business. That's the Texas way.
Did you grow up with that kind of mentality? Or, I mean, what did you grow up with?
So I like grew up first of all, I like grew up as like a punk rocker. And I grew up when George Bush was president. Like, George Bush became president when I was in 7th grade, I think. So I was always like, yo, fuck Bush, fuck Republicans. Because not only was it the right thing to do, but culturally, anyone around me felt the same way. You know what I mean? Now, my dad but my dad was a staunch conservative most of my life. The only time that he kind of shifted more centrist even is when the Tea Party stuff started to happen. And then Trump came in, and now he's like super Democrat guy. But growing up, he loved Bush, he loved Reagan. And my mom is American. She's the opposite. She's like more on my line of thinking. Like, I remember this one time when Reagan died, my mom was making fun of Reagan and like talking to me, and my dad came in and was so offended. He was like, how dare you talk about that man like that? I think for my dad, he's super Catholic. And I think the Christian values and family values of the Republican Party really appealed to him. But I think when you saw stuff like the Tea Party and Trump, he started to feel like, wow, these guys are vulgar. And being vulgar is not part of my values. And I think it just kind of dawned on him like what life is like here, because you have to remember he is not American. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He immigrated here when he was 22, I think. He works in oil and gas. So I think culturally the people that he is around are all pretty fucking Republican. And I think mixing that with like the church, I think in his mind, there was no other way to live life. You know what I mean? Like when you started seeing stuff like Ferguson and George Floyd and all the police brutality that's happened over the last decade that's been really in the news, I think that was the first time that it even dawned on him not to trust a cop. You know what I mean? He just wasn't aware. And I think there's many natural born American citizens who feel the same way, who were like, until it was really in their face, they were like, oh, damn, that's what people have been talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because there are some, like, look, okay, when we lived in New York, my wife's from Harlem. So when we lived in New York,
Yeah.
I would go to community meetings every once in a while just to see what they were like and just kind of like, oh, what is this? And in Harlem, people were working with the cops because there were gangs around and they were trying to stave off gang violence or do whatever, whatever. So they were working with, and it made it really a little more front of my mind, where I'm like, oh, right, this isn't just cut and dry. It isn't just like everyone is on the same side. Like cops are bad, right? That policing, or if we want to be a little more accurate, that policing in America, that the entire act of it is racist and whatever, right? And maybe like individual cops, blah blah blah. You get the spiel, but totally. Like in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's obviously like we're all on the same side of this. And then you see like you get down to like the microcosms of it, and it's a lot more nuanced than I ever thought it was.
Yeah. I think like me growing up being into like punk and hardcore and being a skater too, I was already, of the mindset that cops are my enemy. And I've been to jail and been on probation and all type of shit. So in my life, I've always been like, cops hurt me. You know what I mean? Me as a person, they have directly affected my life in a negative way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm from the suburbs and white, so, my run-ins with the cops are fairly benign, but like Black Flag specifically was like reading like Rollins' Get in the Van book, where they're talking about like clashing with the cops all the time. And, basically the cops being on the side of the racist skins and all that kind of stuff. That was there was a whole time on this show where I was interviewing, I realized like my first my early political awakening happened because of music, because of like Sonic Youth, because of Black Flag, a lot of hardcore. And that's really where it all started. Because I wanted to believe like, oh, I read Chomsky or whatever like that. It started with like, reading about music. Rollins and listening to like, this fucking city is run by pigs, that kind of stuff.
I used to listen to that song every morning before I had to go to court. Every single morning, I would just be blasting that song in my headphones, like, yo, fuck this. And to be clear, my run-ins with the law were about weed. I got put in jail because I had an unsmoked joint in my car because I was leaving work and I thought, it isn't safe to smoke in my car. Let me just roll this and I smoke it when I get home. And when I was pulled over, I'm like, all right, I'm going to be in trouble, but it can't be that bad because I have only one unsmoked joint in my car. I don't have a bag of weed. I have nothing else but that. I'm like not drunk. You know what I mean? I am in my mind. I'm like, I'm probably going to get a warning. But when the long arm of the law came down and cost me thousands of dollars to have me on like probation for a year, that further cemented my anger in how unfair and unjust this whole shit is.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Why wouldn't you? I mean, at any point in your life,
Yeah.
in any American's life, if you're not a billionaire or you're not a millionaire,
Yeah.
like
Very
at
true.
any point in your life, you could just be like, oh, right, this thing is unfair that I'm being subjected to.
And you know what? There actually was one time later in my life, I think I was in my mid-20s, where I was pulled over again, and me and my friend had weed on us, and we were in Texas, and the cop actually let us go. And I remember the cop just kept asking me, like, yo, what are y'all doing? And we were actually on our way to play a music festival. And I just kept telling him, like, man, we're just trying to get to work. Like we are just going to our job. We're not up to anything wrong. Like, we're like not selling weed. We're not doing anything sketchy. We are simply some artists. We like to smoke pot, and we're going to play a concert because it's our livelihood. Can you understand that? And he was like, all right, man, I get it. Go on.
Interesting.
So,
interesting.
You know.
Just, I mean, like, again, in my mind, I'm like, in 2023 at the very least, Post, as Psalm 1 has called it, the civil rights remix, right?
Yes.
It's just that, I love her term. It's just that in my mind, it's like, it's all poisonous. There's nothing, there's no benign interactions anymore.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, it is true. It is all poisonous, but there are still like, there's cracks in even this metaphor. I just lost it, but like, you know what I mean? Like, there are still some benign situations.
Funniest thing about that incident, though, is when he pulled us over, me and my friend were blasting the song Fuck Donald Trump by YG. Like, blasting it after we got pulled over. And like in my mind, I was like, damn, they're about to get us now. Like, not only do we have weed, we're like blasting an anti-Trump song. We're all artists. None of us are white in this car. We are the perfect lick for this cop to hit today.
So is that typical? Is it not that actual interaction or any of these interactions with the cops necessarily typical of growing up in Texas, but that kind of like the feeling of that being there in the air?
Yeah, definitely. But
do you grow up with that?
Definitely grew up with that, but I felt it more when I started to go on tour. Like, I was telling my partner that every time I've gone on tour, we always get pulled over at least once or twice. Always. And it's usually troubling because when you're on tour, you're selling merch and you're probably carrying tons of cash. So when the cop sees you and they want to search the car and they find tons of money, their first thought is, oh, these guys are up to no good, because they're probably not used to the lifestyle of a touring artist. They probably think that it's strange that we might have like a few $1,000s in like cash on us at like any moment. But it's simply because we're just trying to get from like the venue to the hotel, or from the hotel to like the next city, and we don't have time to go to the bank. We like need to use this like cash box for our merch table. It's like, I just think for like them, if you don't know what an artist's life is like, you think it's just partying and getting fucked up and causing trouble, and not that you're actually running a business.
Right. Or that like you're spending 8 hours driving from Salt Lake to Reno or whatever it is to get to the next show.
Yes. If we didn't have to do this, we would be home right now. You know what I mean? Like,
can you just show them the merch and be like, look, this is what we're doing?
It like only works if they're a music person too. And if they are, they always reference some super old group. Like, I've definitely had like cops tell me that they used to be big fans of like Public Enemy or Snoop Dogg or NWA. Like, you know, something to kind of hint like, oh, I was young once before I grew up. You know what I mean?
Can I tell you, by the way, that in my mind, when you said super old, I'm like, oh, the Commodores, Lionel Richie.
Yeah.
And then you're like super old, you know, Outkast.
Dude.
And I'm like, what?
Dude, I mean, That's old school. That's old school music. Like if you were a fan of like Public Enemy, you're probably in your late 50s now.
Mm-hmm,
You know what I mean? Like a fan of them during their prime. You know what I mean?
Right.
Their like biggest record came out in like 89.
Right.
So
wait, did you grow up Catholic too, or was it just your dad's thing?
I like definitely grew up super duper Catholic. I am fucking confirmed. I really hated it growing up. I thought it was, I mean, like most Catholics, you know what I mean? It's like tons of guilt. Like I was the type of kid where if I got in trouble at school or I got a bad grade, my like punishment was to go to fucking confession, was to spend the weekend reading the Bible at home. Like, you know what I mean? My like dad was like having us pray with him every night, like super God, Jesus, Christianity 24/7 was a big deal. Even like as an adult, just a few years ago, my dad was asking me, how can I live with my partner, but we're not married? And I'm like, I mean, maybe we'll get married, but it's not a big deal. And he like straight up asked me like, but aren't you worried about your soul? And I know that might seem like silly, but in his faith, he was taking that very seriously. You know what I mean? So to each their own.
Yeah, sure. No, I didn't even think it was silly. It is, I find it very puzzling because living in the modern world, outside of like basic commandments, like don't kill, don't covet your neighbor's wife, whatever. I don't know. But like outside of like some basic things that make sense still, there's so much of it so much of the Bible, like all the New Testament, all of like Jesus's teachings make sense to me. I mean, I'm Jewish, but like I can read that and be like, yes, this is all good stuff to follow. But between it being warped by the Christian right, by evangelicals,
yes,
and then the other part of it being like stuff that doesn't make sense anymore. Like, you know, don't wear what is it? Something like you can't wear cloth that's like two different kinds of material, like things like that. That just like doesn't make any sense in the modern world. I've always been very puzzled by modern faith. And so it is interesting to me to hear people to like talk to people where like they grew up with something.
Yeah. And like, keep in mind, my dad is 71 years old. So he is definitely coming from a world where he probably didn't know anyone that wasn't Catholic. You know what I mean? Like probably didn't know a single person who was not Catholic his whole life until he had me. And I was like, I don't like church.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Boring. Yeah,
it's fucking boring. It's whack. Like I, and also for like me, from like a social aspect, the church that I went to was in a different neighborhood, and it was in like a really privileged white neighborhood. And that was my first time when I would encounter kids who were like racist or like rude. Like I like grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, but it's pretty mixed too. And I never in my life experienced someone who like said a racial stereotype or made racial jokes that were like offensive. Like it was puzzling to me. So to like mix the like church side that I didn't like, that I thought was like harsh and overly judgmental, mixed with seeing folks my age who were like rude and unfriendly, I was just like, yo, this whole shit is not for me.
Right.
Straight up.
Right. Do you know, did your dad grow up Catholic, or did he find faith after fighting in the war?
I think that's a good question. I would assume that he grew up Catholic, because I think that Catholicism has had a stronghold on the Nigerian tribe that he's from for a very long time. You know what I mean? So I imagine that he probably grew up like, you know, going to schools where it's like very English. You're like wearing a uniform. You're talking about Jesus all day, mixed with other studies. Like, I think his whole world was probably that.
Mm-hmm. When did you start getting into punk?
I started getting into punk when I was in the 6th grade in 1999. I bought that Blink-182 album, Enema of the State. And that was like the first like rock music that I owned. And I bought that because maybe around the fourth or fifth grade, I watched MTV a lot, and I would see Green Day videos. I see a fucking Ramones video, and I'd always say, "Yo, I really like this music. It's like really catchy and it's fast." But that Blink-182 CD, that was the first time where I was like, "Yo, I want to own this," and I became a big fan of Blink. And I started looking into some of their older records, right? And I would look at all the liner notes. And back in those days, there would be like a thank you section where they thank other bands, like,
Right.
and I would just go look up who those bands were, and then just like kind of following the breadcrumbs. Then when I was in the ninth grade, I watched the fucking Decline of Western Civilization. I bought the tape off of eBay because I heard about it on like a message board. And that's when I first heard the Germs and Black Flag and Circle Jerks, Fear. I had Alice Bag. I had never heard of any of those groups before. And I think it was that moment where I was like, all right, I'm all the way into this now.
Okay. Now, when did you actually form the desire or ambition in your head that that music was something you wanted to pursue? Was it around this time? Was it earlier than this? And then it gets filtered through a kind of punk mentality?
Damn, that's a great question. I would say pretty much since day one, I always liked music, right? Like music was always my main interest. I was always watching music videos. Like anytime that I watched TV as a kid, I was probably watching music videos, right? And my mom and my dad and my grandmother, who I all grew up with, they all like music too, and they all had tons of records and CDs. So I listened to their stuff. Like I was very music obsessed. And in elementary school, I got a drum kit, but I didn't take it as seriously. And then in middle school, in the 8th grade, I bought a bass. I like worked a summer job and then bought a bass with, the idea that, all right, I'm going to try to do music for real. I want to play bass in a punk band. Like this is my calling. Okay. Then in 10th grade, that's when I started booking shows. I booked the show. The first show I ever booked was for this band called The Ergs. They're from Jersey. And I booked them simply because I was a fan. I had only been to like a couple of shows in my life, period. But I cold call emailed them and I said, hey, I see y'all are going on tour. Y'all are going to be near Houston. If y'all come to Houston, I will set up the show. And I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. I basically tried to copy what I saw people do previously. Like I read about how you would, Xerox flyers and stuff. So I made a flyer by hand. I took it to Kinko's. I made a bunch of copies. And then I thought, all right, where do I normally see flyers? I like to see them at like the record stores, at the coffee shops, at skate shops. So I just went to all of those that I knew about and just put up flyers. And then I got my high school directory and I hand mailed a flyer to anyone in my school that I thought would like punk, whether I knew them or not, just based on how they dressed or just my vibe. And after that show, which only like 5 people came to that show, but it was still fun. And I stayed friends with the band too. From like that moment, I was really like, all right, now that I put on a show, I have an instrument that I can kind of play. Let me try to really do this. And at the same time, I was also a rapper too. Like I had a bunch of friends and half of my friend group were in the punk and the other half were friends that I grew up with who all wanted to be in a rap group together. So I would do both back and forth, but it's really the punk stuff that really showed me that we could do it by ourselves. You know what I mean? Like it really wasn't until I started like learning more about punk and like meeting some like punks who were just like a year or two older than me that it really dawned on me. It's like, oh, in any genre of music, rap, punk or otherwise, I can record myself. I can book my own show. We can make our own flyers. Like we don't have to wait to like grow up and like get a record deal or something. Like we can just start doing it and just pass it out at our school and that's like enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting because I you were saying that, and I was just thinking, I'm like, I guess indie hip hop really didn't start to have a scene like indie hip hop, like Mike Eagle or Bus Driver, No Can Do, like there until like I don't know, last like 15 years maybe.
Well, that stuff was really popular when I was a kid too. Like around the same time that I put on that first show, one of the first shows that I went to was like MF Doom. I was a Doom fan. I was a Murs fan, but because something that really appealed to me about punk music is that it had this underground component. That yes, there were bands that I saw on like TV or like heard on the radio, but there were tons of bands that were not on the radio or not on TV. And I would talk to friends mostly on the internet about these bands. And I really liked how we had like kind of like our own secret language, like these bands and these artists that not everyone knows about. And then when I got more into underground rap music, I started to see, oh, this same thing can also apply to rap. Let me look for artists who are kind of doing that same thing. And all of those artists would like play to the same venues as like a band would play. Like you would go see an Atmosphere show or an MF Doom show or a Merge show, and it was at the same venue that like the indie rock band played or the punk band played. And they had the same culture of like making zines and just that whole DIY lifestyle was like part of that too. And I always identify with that as the music that's for me. Like I always felt like underground music is my home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. By the way, I take back immediately what I said because you're saying that I'm like, oh, right. This is like what? Like late 90s into the early 2000s. I'm like Aesop Rock. You got Doom. There's like so much other stuff going on then. And I'm just like, oh, right.
But no, I don't blame you because I think, honestly, I feel like around 2008 or so, that like scene kind of died out. And I think a lot of us kind of just stopped thinking about it. I think it wasn't until like the mid 2010s when you had artists like Milo or Open Mike Eagle. I always looked at them as like, oh, y'all are kind of doing a callback to this thing that we all grew up on. And you're making it popular again for a new generation of people.
Yeah. But like when I started to get into like indie hip hop, I'm like, oh, Def Jux. There was this whole thing going on, and I've totally kind of like erased that from my mind, and I'm just, and that's where I was when I was at. I'm like, oh, right. This is going back, like decades.
And like that stuff too was like also kind of like toxic because I remember, like, I've always been the kind of person that loved all styles of music. My whole life, I was never like, it was never. Like I'm the type of person that does not associate music with your identity. Mm-hmm. So no matter who you are, if I like the song, I would show it to you just because I'm like, this is good.
Yeah.
But I remember growing up in like the indie rap thing, all of my friends who were really into like indie rap, they hated when I would listen to like Jay-Z or something like that. You know what I mean? They were like really like, yo, rap music that's on the radio and on TV is over there, and indie rap music is over here. Same with punk, you know what I mean? Like I always thought that Blink-182 was a really good band, but at that time, because they were so popular, a lot of friends of mine who like punk, they were like, oh, that's like poser music, or it's like weak. Or now that's changed. Now you could be young, and if you're like a serious music head, you might love Blink-182, and it's like some like old school music. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Why do you think, or what do you think made you so comfortable being able to navigate, both of these like subgenre kind of groups or subcultures, and also like being okay, like listening to Jay-Z or listening to Kanye at the time or whatever, right? What do you think it is about you that allowed you to kind of like adapt or navigate these different groups?
Man, I don't know. It just always felt natural to me. And when I was a kid, my mom would bring this up. She was like, you have all types of friends coming over to our house. you know. And I don't know, just in my head, I thought maybe because I'm like a huge nerd and I like having lots of interest. I always am finding something that's fascinating to me, and I always want to find someone else to talk to about it, even if their lifestyle is different from me, or they look different from me, or even if I'm a newbie to like the subculture or the topic that I'm interested in. I was always into talking to people about it, and it just felt normal to me to have you know, have a wide range of taste. You know what I mean? It just kind of, it just felt normal that, all right, there's like some morning where on my way to school, I want to listen to a UGK album because I'm in this mood. Or another day, I like woke up feeling like this. I want to listen to my Jawbreaker CD, like just whatever. Or I woke up and I want to listen to like a slow jam or some ballads or R&B or reggae, just like I just always felt like there is so much art out there. There's so much music out there. Why should anyone limit themselves? And there's so many different types of people out there. Why should we limit ourselves from getting to know each other? Like, I think it's more fun when I get to talk to someone that's wildly different than me, that has a different, even when it comes to like, you know, like their like views on politics or something. Someone that has totally opposite views of me, I still feel comfortable sitting down and like talking to them and just agreeing to fucking disagree. And I think the best example of this I ever heard was back in the day, Marcus Garvey came to the US and he met with the KKK because he had heard about how like violent they were and how fucked up they were. And he was like, yo, I want to sit with them or like sit with members of this organization. And I want them to tell me to their face what they actually do, what they actually believe in, what their goals are. And I'll tell them mine. And it ended with, of course, them not being on the same page about probably anything. And he just simply left the meeting like, all right, thanks for chatting with me. Now I know who y'all are. And you can have your life and I have mine. And, you know, I am against everything that you fucking believe in. And that's fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there was a dude who actually like, he goes around and just by talking, I mean, like it's not just like one conversation, but he has lots of conversations with like Klan members. And then through these conversations over time, eventually they like end up leaving the Klan. And he has like a whole collection of their old robes where he's
I've heard about this guy.
I forget his name, but like where, you know, there was like a NPR story about him a while ago. But where it you know, it always like, you know, growing up Jewish, learning about the Holocaust too young, I always, I'm like very skeptical of, even though I hear about these kinds of conversions or these like, you know, being able to through conversation convince people that what they do is fucked up. It's tough for me in my heart to hold that in there, to be like, oh, like imagining like, you know, someone's like shoving me onto a train.
Totally.
And I'm just like, let's have a conversation about this.
You know what? I think for like me, I also learned about that stuff very early. Like I grew up in a neighborhood that's probably like a Bed-Stuy where there's a lot of Black nationalists. There's like from an early age, I was aware of these hate groups, and I was aware of like the Holocaust. Like even in my high school, most of the white kids at my school, which was in a Black neighborhood, were mostly Jewish. So we would study the Holocaust constantly because I felt like the program of that school wanted us to be aware that even though we're all different, we all have this shared history of being fucking oppressed by somebody. You know what I mean? So that definitely made me feel like, all right, there is solidarity with all oppressed people globally. And yeah, I don't know. I'm like kind of rambling now, but
No,
yeah, that's just we are getting
yeah.
somewhere.
I actually want to go back to something because I think it's interesting that when I was younger, I was not very self-aware. I don't even know how to actually phrase this. I was at the same time not self-aware enough about who I was, but also way too self-aware about who I was.
Yeah.
And I think through my music choices, I was trying to find an identity and trying to like, I listened to a lot of indie rock and stuff. And I used that as a way to point myself towards understanding who I was. And I say this as a foil because it seemed like and tell me if maybe this is off base, but your ease in being able to navigate these different subcultures, I wonder, did you have a better sense of self of who you were as a person? So it didn't matter, you weren't like, you didn't need these subcultures to define you because you kind of knew who you were.
And I think you're right. And I think another part of that, when it goes back to like youth, is like being like, bullied or made fun of or like seen as a nerd. Like I had those kind of experience pretty early, mainly in like middle school. So I would spend a lot of time to myself getting into music, reading about music, studying music. And I always felt like I am good enough on my own with my own interests to keep me happy. And if I meet people that share those interests, great. But if I meet people that don't get what I'm into or don't like what I'm into, then that's fine. And they're missing out. And that doesn't have to make me hate them or anything. Like I just get out their fucking way and I go back to my room.
Interesting. Okay. Well, like I have so much resentment for other people. So what makes you so kind of just like even keeled?
I think another experience happened to me that I think really changed how I looked at myself when I was in the 10th grade. And this was like right around the time that I started like putting on shows, making music, passing out stuff. There was this like blog called Xanga, like it was like a live journal or something. And these kids made this Xanga post that was all about me and how much of a loser I am and how no girls like me and stuff. And a bunch of kids started to print it out and pass it around the school to the point that our like school stopped us from using the fucking computers for like a week or two because that's all kids were talking about. And in my mind, I was like, yo, I'm going to have to change schools. I got to go to a new district. My life is over. I was freaking out. But from that thing happening, I started to make more friends. Like I started to meet people who had only heard of me through this controversy, quote unquote. And they were really nice to me. I started meeting more like girls. People were like curious about the shows that I was putting on. And that kind of like taught me that, oh, it really doesn't matter what people say about you, which I think really translates to being an entertainer too, where you have to deal with like, negative comments or like gossip. Actually, none of that shit fucking matters. You know what I mean? Like none of that stops you from like living your best life or being happy. So who cares what someone thinks or says about you if it's rude or like negative? It has does no actual harm to my real life. It hurts more in my mind. And if I don't focus on this negative stuff, then I won't feel the stress of it. If I just focus on what I actually do, which is make music and have interests and just be a kind person, and I think I'm kind of cool, let me just stick to that, and everyone else, fuck them.
That's wise for a teenager to have that kind of knowledge.
I mean, mostly, I definitely think a lot of this is because I spent a lot of time just in my room thinking. You know what I mean? Just like really pondering over every single thing.
Yeah. Was there ever any other track, or once you started playing, the bass, or once you started like producing shows or whatever, was it always like, it's going to be music in some fashion?
Yeah, definitely at that point. And I even looked through my inbox recently from when I was a teenager, and I found all these emails that I would send to like music industry people, and I was talking like, yo, I am this years old, I go to this school, but I put on shows, I'm making music, I'm just starting out, but I think that this is something I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. And then when I got to college, I had this moment when I was in the library doing something boring, and it just hit me. It's like, I'm gonna work in music forever, whether that's as an artist or an A&R, or maybe I'll be a producer, or maybe I'll put on shows. This is what makes me happiest, so I'm gonna always find a way to make a living from it.
Do you remember what you were doing in that moment? Because I think it's such an important moment.
I was like filling out some like forms, like fucking FAFSA, I was doing some dull paperwork that I didn't want to do. That maybe I like made an error and had to do it again, and I thought it was a waste of time. And I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna get through this moment, but this is not gonna become my life. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Like after this period of my life, I'm not going to spend the majority of my time working on shit someone else wants me to do. I'm going to work on my own dreams, my own goals, and I'm going to figure it out by any means necessary.
Oh, this is so interesting. Did your parents have something that they wanted you to do?
Definitely. I mean, having an African dad, he like wanted me to be like a fucking doctor or lawyer or something, or an engineer, which is what he does. And that stuff never appealed to me. Never at all. And I think another thing that helped is my mom is an artsy person. You know what I mean? My like mom sings, never in like a professional way, but like growing up, she like loved music. Like my mom, it was the first person to tell me about like David Bowie and Velvet Underground and like Devo and like all these different types of artists. And she is an author. She's a great singer. She plays an instrument. And I think she was always there for me when I wanted to talk about music, even though for her, she was like, yes, I want you to finish school and be able to take care of yourself. But she was very supportive of my music interests. Like, give me rides to like the studio, give me rides to my show, letting my friends come and have band practice at our house. You know what I mean? Like letting my friends come and make music and like spend the night and making dinner for us. Like, so I always felt that I had a support system. And when it came to like music, I was always like the music leader in my friend group. Like I was the one who was like, I'm going to buy a mic. I'm going to get a DAW. I'm going to figure out how to record us. I'm going to figure out how to write a song. I'm going to figure out how to book a show. I'm going to figure out how to talk to a manager if you ever meet one. Like I'm going to do the legwork. And if y'all rock with me, I want y'all to come with me and do this with me, and we can have fun doing it.
Yeah. Okay. We're right at the end, and I'm just curious, and maybe there is no answer for this, but I'm wondering, when did you start to be aware of what your dad wanted for you? Because in my mind, I'm like, at what point does it no longer weigh heavy on you? That's the real question in the background. Because when I was younger, and my parents' desires for me, they were never, they're like, oh, you can do whatever you want. But I knew what they wanted. I knew what they really wanted,
exactly.
right?
Yes.
And it took me a long time to get out from under that. And I'm wondering for you, like, were you aware early on, and then through the, like, the shit you went through with the school bullying you, that where you were just like, all right, well, now I don't care about anyone's desires for me? Or was it like later on? I'm very curious.
It was later, more like college life, because I think then my like dad started to see that this was becoming more than just like a hobby, that I was really trying to like dedicate time to it. Like I would like go on tour and like not be in like school, like you know what I mean? Like he could start to see like, oh, he is actually missing the opportunities that I want for him to go and chase this dream, I think it was at that moment where he started to get more like harsh, like, yo, you're like fucking up. Like, I don't think you're doing the right thing. Like, you like need to focus on school. Like, I think in his mind, he thought it was just a fad. But it wasn't a fad, actually. It was actually what I want to do for the rest of my fucking life. So
yeah. Okay. Well, then how did you emotionally deal with, like, as he started to get more harsh? I assume that is not great. It doesn't feel, I mean, I know it doesn't from my own dealing with my parents. It doesn't feel great.
I would talk about it in my music. I actually have a reissue album coming out. It's the 10-year anniversary of my album, Smart Ass Black Boy. We remixed the album. We remastered the album. It's going to come out soon. And on that album, I have a song called Father's Day that's all about how it kind of hurts me that he's so disappointed in what I've done with my life. Whereas even though he's, a fucking Republican at the time, kind of a harsh guy, I always looked up to him. You know what I mean? So I'm like, damn, it like really sucks that you don't trust what I'm doing with my life, but I actually still want to make you proud. And in recent years, now that we're all grown and he's clearly seeing that I've made a life for myself and I'm not like broke or like desperate or like running out of luck, I think now he's like, yo, I can see that you did the right thing. Like you had more faith in what you wanted to do than I had faith in it. And now he's the type of guy that anytime I'm in like the newspaper or in a magazine, he'll like clip it out. He'll like save it. He'll like call me if he hears somebody talking about my music or something. I just think, I actually talked to my mom about this and she was like, I think that your dad and even me, we just wanted you to have a good life. And we have seen so many people fail chasing their dreams, especially if they want to be an actor or be an artist or anything. We were just scared that could happen to you. But you have clearly proven that wasn't your path and you took it seriously. You know what I mean? Like, I would dedicate all of my time to how do I make this work? Like, who do I need to meet? Where do I need to travel to? How much money do I need to save up for my part-time jobs to like buy an instrument? Like, I just think that over time they saw that it wasn't just for fun. And even when I had a hard time, like, being on like a tour that goes poorly or being on like a TV show that gets canceled, and they saw me to keep going and just keep chasing my dreams and keep finding money and opportunities, I think it just hit them like, yo, this is what his destiny is, I guess.
That actually seems like a really nice place to end. Tony, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Andy, you are the man. This is fun.
No, you're the man.
Well, till next time, buddy.
All right. See you, dude.
Thank you, man.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye. Bye, bye. Beginnings. Beginnings good.